Good evening. I would like to welcome you all to the West Data Annual Board Meeting. As our custom, would you please stand for the pledge? Thank you. At this time, I would like to call for a motion to approve the posted amended consent amended agenda that was posted January 11th, 2021. Do I have a motion for that?
I'd like to make a motion.
Trustee Johnson has made a motion.
Okay. I would move to approve the amended agenda that was posted on January 11th, 2021 with the good faith reason to add discussion and action on the process of interviewing candidates for the vacant trustee in Zone 4, seat in Zone 4.
Do I have a second on that motion? Second. Trustee Ozuna has seconded. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
The motion passes. Okay, for the first item of business in this reorganization is the selection of the board chair. I would like to open the floor for nominations with the reminder that nominations do not require a second. So at this time, I'd like to open the floor for nomination for board chair. Trustee Ozuna?
I'd like to nominate Trustee Johnson. There we go. I'd like to nominate Trustee Johnson as board chair.
Thank you, Trustee Ozuna. Are there any other nominations on the floor? Seeing none, I would like to open the nomination or open the vote for Trustee. Yes, I'd like to open the vote for Trustee Johnson to be board chair. Do I have a vote?
Aye.
Motion? Thank you.
Aye.
Aye from Trustee Ozuna, Trustee Buffy,
Aye.
and Trustee Kloffenstein. Congratulations, Trustee Johnson.
Should I take it from here, Clerk Newbold?
Yes, it is your turn.
Okay. All right. The second item on our agenda is to nominate or to elect a vice chair. Do I have any motions?
Chairperson Johnson, I would move that Trustee Ozuna be I would move that she be our vice chair.
Thank you, Trustee Kloppenstein. Are there any other motions? Sorry. Actually, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of Trustee Ozuna being vice chair, please say aye.
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 All right. Looks like the ayes have it. The chairman votes aye. At this time, I'd like to, because I'm remote and I can't see in the room, I'd like to turn the running of the meeting over for tonight to the vice chair, Trustee Ozuna.
Great. Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson. Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson. Moving along on the agenda for number 3, is there a motion to elect other appointments?
I'll move that we elect the other appointments as recommended by the superintendent.
Great. Thank you, Trustee Buffy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Kloffenstein. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Great. And that one passes. Can I have a motion to approve or deny the designated public posting places?
I move that we approve the designated public posting places.
Thank you for that motion, Trustee Buffy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Klopfenstein. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, moving right along. I need a motion to approve or deny the meeting dates that we have set for 2021.
Vice Chair Ozuna, I would move that we approve the meeting dates for 2021 as provided by administration.
Thank you, Trustee Klopfenstein. Is there a second?
I would second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? And that one passes. Next on our agenda is to sign the Code of Ethics. Chairwoman Johnson, do you have a copy of that where you're at?
I do, and Clerk Newbold and I have worked out that I'll sign it and bring my copy tomorrow.
Okay, great. Can we take maybe, I'm going to say 5 minutes to read through this, and then we can sign them tonight and leave them with the clerk? Okay, we're gonna just take 5 minutes to read through these. Thank you. Thank you for that break so we could read through the Code of Ethics. Has everybody here had enough time? Fantastic. Chairwoman Johnson, have you been able to read through that?
Yes, thank you.
All right, fantastic. Before we move on to the consent agenda, Clerk Newbold, do you have any additional information?
Trustees, Superintendent Reynolds, I've attached all the information to the agenda.
Great, thank you. Can I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Chairman Zuna,
Yes, Chairwoman Johnson?
I would move that we adopt the consent agenda.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Great, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I will be abstaining from the consent vote due to having a conflict of interest containing one of the items.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Buffy. There's 3 ayes and an abstention, and the consent agenda passes. The consent agenda tonight included the resignation of our superintendent. I'm going to keep this short because I think we'll have lots of time to celebrate Dr. Rannells and her contributions to West Ada before she leaves this summer. But I didn't want to miss the opportunity to just thank her and let her know how much she's going to be missed. So thank you. Celebrations to come. Our process tonight for the recommended attendance area changes is going to include a presentation by Ms. Horner on the process and the proposals, followed by patron testimony by area, and then we'll have discussion and questions by the board. We will not be taking any action on the recommended changes until our next meeting. Ms. Horner, I believe the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairwoman Johnson, trustees, Dr. Reynolds, good evening. In September, we convened a committee of parent volunteers and staff to propose an attendance area for the new Owyhee High School and to address other areas of the district to balance enrollment between overcrowded and under-enrolled schools. We emailed an informational video presentation explaining the scope of the project to all West Ada families. 112 patrons signed up to be on the committee. We drew names by region to ensure there would be representation from all the affected areas. Once we started our committee meetings, the members subdivided into 2 groups. They worked with their subcommittees to sift through all the data and create a proposal. We then met as an entire committee to reconcile the 2 proposals. The decision for the final proposal came by a consensus, not a vote. These volunteers have spent hours of their own time. They came with personal opinions and ideas, but they worked together respectfully. They took time outside of meetings to drive the areas. Their discussions were thoughtful. They asked good questions, and in the end, some of their own kids were affected by the changes. They have provided a great service to our students and our school district, and I am very appreciative of their efforts and their focus on the students. The committee considered the comments from the public, both via email, both sent in via email and those presented at the 3 public hearings. A final meeting took place to discuss whether changes should be made, and tonight I will present to you their final proposals. A few months ago, the board approved a policy containing criteria ranked in order of relative importance for the committee to consider when creating attendance areas. The committee used this policy as the framework for their decisions. Each attendance area has a uniqueness to it, so the committee looked at these criteria and how they relate to that specific attendance area. This is part of the process that takes place in the committee meetings, and it hinges on the participation of parents that are objective and can provide valuable input. The policy states, quote, "The overriding goal of altering school attendance areas is to reduce enrollment and relieve overcrowding. No other criteria holds greater weight while evaluating proposals to alter existing attendance areas or establishing an attendance area for a new school," close quote. There have been objections to students being moved from the walk zone of Rocky Mountain High School. There have been questions about whether the committee considered the future growth potential and concerns over students potentially moving back to Rocky Mountain because of the growth that surrounding areas of Owyhee will experience in the next few years. I validate those concerns, and yes, the committee did discuss all those and many other possibilities. In the community presentation for the 2018 bond proposal, the request for taxpayers to approve a bond was made stating the new high school would, quote, relieve overcrowding at Eagle High and Rocky Mountain and absorb enrollment increases in the Meridian High School attendance area, close quote. This is what we promised the public, and this is what the committee's proposal does. Because the overriding goal of altering school attendance areas is to reduce enrollment and relieve overcrowding, the committee considered both design and program capacity and created proposals that balance enrollment. Emergency capacity is not a consideration in creating attendance areas. It is very important for the board and the public to understand the timeline of registration. The registration process is dependent on the approval of the attendance area. As a former school secretary, I understand more than most the urgency to finalize the attendance areas so the registration process can continue as planned. High school registrars begin the process of registration in February for the following year. And for elementary, parents have already started submitting pre-registrations for kindergarten. Registration is a months-long process. It starts with the registrars or secretaries changing each student's next school indicator in PowerSchool. They do this using information from the attendance area maps. We cannot start the pre-registration process until students have been properly identified and their next school indicators changed in PowerSchool. It isn't until those changes have been made that FTE can be determined for the next year. This is all dependent on the approval of the attendance areas. Let me explain a little about the process of creating an attendance area. It starts with locating the students geographically. The student addresses are geocoded, then organized into smaller geographic locations, taking into consideration natural barriers such as rivers, canals, and busy roads. During the committee meetings, the members look at the population of smaller regions, usually a square mile, to create possible attendance area proposals. As they look at different scenarios, the committee looks at each one and analyzes the current enrollment numbers and the projected future enrollment numbers. The committee uses a preliminary plat map to show areas of future growth. The committee also identifies developments currently under construction. Each plat and parcel is counted. A student generation rate is used to formulate the projected number of students the district can anticipate for each area. The committee also looks at the attendance areas of the feeder schools to determine what percentage of students will be moving on together, keeping as many students going from one level to the next as possible. The scope of the attendance area project was very large. This again speaks volume to the value of our attendance area committee. For this board meeting, we will break the scope down into 3 discussion items: the Owyhee attendance area, the northern elementary schools, and the southern elementary schools. Starting with Owyhee High School attendance area. Currently, Rocky Mountain and Eagle High School have substantial overcrowding, with enrollment exceeding capacity. As I stated, Owyhee High School is intended to relieve the overcrowding and allow for future growth. In creating a proposal for a new high school, for a new attendance area, adjustments were made to the Eagle, Rocky Mountain, and Meridian High School attendance areas. This is the committee's recommendation for the Owyhee High School attendance area. Incoming seniors will be allowed to remain at their current high school for their final year. Seniors must provide their own transportation, and their siblings will be expected to attend the new high school. We anticipate the school will open with enrollment between 1,350 and 1,650 students, but there are a few unknowns, including how many students will return from the virtual schoolhouse, how many seniors will choose to stay at their current school, and of course the rate of growth in the area. Owyhee High School's proposed attendance area will balance the enrollment and reduce the overcrowding at both Rocky Mountain and Eagle High Schools. Based on feedback the committee received, it is recommended that students living in the square mile south of Owyhee High School be allowed to open enroll at Owyhee High School. This area was discussed at length during the beginning stages of the committee reconciliation. Initially, some of the committee members wanted to have the southern border reach south to Cherry Lane. This would allow any student living directly across the street to attend Owyhee High School instead of traveling to Meridian High. During the reconciliation process, the committee discussed the considerations in the policy and tried several possibilities to extend the southern boundary. If only that square mile was put in the Owyhee attendance area, the committee would be forcing a very small number of students to leave the peers they attended elementary and middle school with to attend a high school where they might not know anybody. In order to create a large enough percentage of students attending Meridian Middle School to attend Owyhee, a significant portion of Meridian High School enrollment would be affected. This would take available capacity away from Owyhee, which would affect how it could accommodate future growth. The committee even discussed the possibility of changing the middle school attendance areas, but the fundamental flaw with that idea was creating unbalanced enrollment and overcrowding at some middle schools. Ultimately, the committee's original proposal to the public drew the line for the southern boundary at Ustick Road. Residents from the square mile sent in feedback stating they wished to attend Owyhee High School despite the feeder school consideration. There are just 11 students projected. Due to the small number of students living in this area, allowing them to open enroll at Owyhee High School does not negatively impact the balance of enrollment, nor does it force any student away from their peers. The committee feels this to be a fair solution. Several patrons requested the northern border be adjusted to allow more students living in the same community to move from middle school to high school together. The committee considered this request and agreed to it based on the considerations of keeping a larger percentage of students together moving from middle school to high school and changing school for the fewest students possible. It also slightly reduced both the current and future enrollment of Owyhee High School, which the committee agrees is acceptable. The new proposed northern border is West New Hope Road until it reaches Wing Road. It then jogs south briefly to keep a cul-de-sac together, finally extending east to Owyhee High School. Several requests were made to make a minor change to create continuity within a neighborhood. This border is not specific to the high school attendance area. It is also the boundary between Sawtooth and Star Middle Schools and Willow Creek and currently Star Elementary. This request was made by several patrons in the neighborhood to change all three attendance areas to allow this neighborhood to attend school together at all three levels. Changing this attendance area line would only cause a change for a few students. The current border splits this community along an unnatural border. It was originally drawn before the development to the west was built. For reference, the subdivision on the east is Spurwing and the subdivision on the west is Spurwing Heights. Prior to receiving public feedback, the committee had discussed this change as a possibility, but did not come to a consensus because of the consideration to change schools for as few students as possible. After reviewing the public feedback, the area was discussed again, and the committee came to a consensus to move the border to all three levels. During the public hearing process, parents expressed concerns about the proposed plan. The most frequent concerns expressed are shown here. The committee wants to convey to the public and the board that they really did take into consideration the walk zone of Rocky Mountain High School. The 6 blocks surrounding Rocky Mountain contain 5 of the densest blocks in the entire district. The 2 blocks south of McMillan are not entirely in the walk zone. Some are being bused to Rocky Mountain. These were the blocks the committee determined were necessary to move to relieve the overcrowding. The population in the blocks north of Chinden does not compare to the population in these blocks. These 2 blocks also follow the same feeder pattern from elementary through middle school, and with this proposal will continue through high school. The block to the west of Rocky Mountain has a larger walk zone and more students in the walk zone than the block to the south of Rocky Mountain. This proposal made by a parent was considered by the committee after receiving public feedback. The main advantage of this plan is keeping the high schools at the center of the attendance areas, allowing those living in the Rocky Mountain Walk Zone to stay at Rocky Mountain High School. The premise is that Rocky is already functioning at overcapacity, and the enrollment at Owyhee can phase in as current students graduate from Rocky. The committee did not believe this proposal fell in line with the attendance area policy. For example, it does not address the feeder schools. The dark outlined area is the sawtooth attendance area, and you can see the small number of students this proposal sends away from their peers. It also changes schools for many more students. You can see the students from Rocky Mountain being reassigned to Centennial, and the students from Centennial being reassigned to Meridian High. And it does not reduce the overcrowding at Rocky Mountain High School enough. Other proposals similar to this were suggested by other patrons to allow those living in the Rocky Mountain Walk Zone to remain at Rocky Mountain. However, like this one, none of them fulfilled the other criteria established by the board in the policy. The committee recommends adopting the Owyhee High School attendance area as proposed, along with the adjustment to the Star and Sawtooth Middle Schools and Willow Creek Elementary attendance areas. The committee recommends allowing the students living south of Owyhee High School from Eustic Road to Cherry Lane between Star Road and McDermott Road to open enroll at Owyhee High School. Now I'll address the northern elementary schools. The Attendance Area Committee looked at the current enrollments, the design, and the program capacity of the northern elementary schools. Their proposal to balance enrollment will affect the attendance areas for Seven Oaks, Eagle Hills, Eagle, Star, and Pleasant View elementary schools. There are 156 students living in the Star attendance area currently attending either Eagle Elementary or Seven Oaks Elementary School. Adding these students back into Star Elementary would put their enrollment at 800. Unfortunately, there was no way to incorporate those students into Star Elementary without adjusting the attendance area. The committee spent hours on these proposals and considered many different options. This is the committee's recommendation for the proposed attendance areas for Seven Oaks, Eagle Hills, Eagle, Star, and Pleasant View elementary schools. These include minor changes the committee made after reviewing and discussing the feedback from the public. Again, I'd like to mention how well the committee members worked together to come up with a solution. At times, it seemed impossible. One big challenge was creating attendance areas for 3 schools that are so close to each other. Another big challenge was figuring out the best way to get enough students from Star, taking into consideration the board policy, but also accessibility to the schools. Then there's the challenge of considering the feeder schools, then the future growth. I don't know if I can adequately express appreciation to the committee members for coming together and providing a solution to these challenges. This is the committee's recommendation for the Eagle Hills Elementary attendance area. This proposal successfully reduces the overcrowding and should allow all students to attend classes inside the building instead of in portables. Again, this was very difficult because Eagle Hills Elementary is right in the middle of the other 2 schools. It was necessary to extend the western border past Linder Road to the west to balance and reduce enrollment at Star. The committee considered the public comments and requests from patrons to allow the neighborhood already in the walk zone to remain in the Eagle Hills Elementary attendance area. The original proposal was presented to the public, drew the line at Floating Feather Road. The suggestion was discussed by the committee and accepted as feasible while still significantly reducing the enrollment at Eagle Hills. This border was drawn carefully to ensure no next-door neighbors would attend different schools. Streets and cul-de-sacs are kept together. The homes on the east side of this boundary line will be in the walk zone of their assigned school, Seven Oaks Elementary, while those on the west side will be in the walk zone of Eagle Hills Elementary. We did receive feedback on this change from some patrons who preferred the original proposal. In considering this change, the committee studied the enrollment numbers the walk zones for both schools, the neighborhood, the number of students moved, and the crosswalk providing safe access to Eagle Hills Elementary. This is not a change from the current attendance area. It is a change from the original proposal. And the committee believes it aligns better with the board policy than their original proposal. This is the committee's recommendation for the Seven Oaks Elementary attendance area. This proposal utilizes the current capacity of the school while allowing for growth from the Dry Creek and Avamore developments. There are still 791 sites approved for construction in this area, which could produce 255 additional students. The committee created this attendance area with this information in mind to accommodate for future growth. This is the committee's recommendation for the Eagle Elementary attendance area. This attendance area will help alleviate overcrowding at Eagle Hills Elementary and provide room for the growing population. This attendance area was also a challenge due to how close Eagle Elementary is to Eagle Hills and Seven Oaks. The attendance area also needed to expand to take in students from Star. Members of the attendance area committee felt it was important for families to have easy access along State Street to Eagle Elementary. The principal from Star Elementary, Mrs. Carnes, provided some valuable feedback on the original proposal, which the committee took into consideration. Based on this feedback, the boundary on the west was changed from Star Road just to the east, as you see here. This allows students on both sides of South Main Street, as well as those living in Starlight Meadows subdivision, to remain at Star Elementary. While considering accessibility for these students and the ultimate goal, which is balancing enrollment, this small number of students did not significantly impact the enrollment. While this reduces the initial enrollment of Eagle Elementary, the preliminary plat data indicates the growth planned for this attendance area will compensate for the change from the original proposal. This is the committee's recommendation for the Star Elementary attendance area. As I mentioned before, the committee had to consider ways to reduce the size of the Star attendance area due to the number of students living in and around Star. The committee recognizes this will only allow for so much growth, and there will need to be another school in Star in the near future. There are currently over 1,900 approved home sites yet to be developed and still much more land available to build on. This is the committee's recommendation for the Pleasant View Elementary attendance area. This change has two benefits. It helps balance current and future enrollment at Star Elementary. It also corrects neighborhood continuity in an area where the attendance area line was drawn prior to the construction of the final phase of a subdivision. This reflects the change based on public feedback we received to extend the Willow Creek Elementary attendance area to Black Cat Road. The committee recommends this modification be made to the Willow Creek Elementary attendance area. The proposed change moves the boundary line to the west 1/3 mile to Black Cat Road, north of Chinden. It was not a consideration the committee originally made. It was requested by several parents through the feedback form. The committee analyzed the impact this would have on Willow Creek Elementary and decided that this was a feasible request. With these proposed attendance area changes, the current and projected enrollment will be more balanced until a new school can be built. The committee sought many ways to more significantly reduce the enrollment at Star Elementary. However, each solution created different issues that weren't in line with the priorities in the policy. The preliminary plat data indicates a projection of 674 additional students living in Star in the near future. The attendance area committee believes there is the need for an additional elementary to balance enrollment in this area. And here are the elementary sites that the district already owns or anticipates owning. During the public hearing process, parents expressed concerns about the proposed plans. The most frequent concerns expressed are shown here. The committee did not receive any alternate proposals other than those that I've already discussed. The committee recommends adopting the attendance areas for the following schools as proposed: Seven Oaks, Eagle Hills, Eagle, Star, Pleasant View, and Willow Creek Elementary Schools. The committee further recommends that West Ada School District propose a bond measure as soon as possible to include one elementary school in or around Star to relieve future overcrowding and accommodate for the vast growth in the area. While the Attendance Area Committee has identified the need for another school in this area, we recognize that it would be a bond committee that would create the scope of the bond to present to the public. Give me 1 second. As you can see, an additional elementary school has been added to the proposal for the Southern Elementary attendance areas. Based on the feedback and alternate proposals the committee received, a decision was made to make changes to the original proposal. The committee's assignment was to create an attendance area for Chaparral Elementary. Next year it will be on a traditional calendar with a traditional attendance area. The other assignment was to find a way to remove the enrollment cap at Hillsdale Elementary. This has been attempted before with the last attendance area committee, but they were not able to find a successful solution. Here is the committee's recommendation for the Chaparral, Peregrine, Mary McPherson, Hillsdale, and Sienna Elementary Schools. Once again, the committee considered many options in creating these attendance areas with the goal of balancing enrollment. The committee heard overwhelming concern over crossing the Meridian Road overpass. Alternate proposals were received and considered during the committee's final reconciliation meeting. This is the final proposal the committee is recommending, which eliminates the need to travel that overpass. This is the committee's recommendation for the Chaparral Elementary attendance area. It encompasses the current Peregrine Elementary attendance area, except for the 2 blocks near Peregrine Elementary. This was a natural decision because a good portion of Chaparral's existing students already live in the area. It also moves students from Mary McPherson to Chaparral, creating available space for the growth in the area. The eastern boundary line south of the freeway was changed from the original proposal to Linder Road. This is the committee's recommendation for the Peregrine Elementary attendance area. This allows those students who live on the west side of Meridian Road to use the 10-mile overpass instead of the Meridian Road overpass, which is less congested. This does change the proposed school for the students living between Linder and Stoddard Roads to balance enrollment at Peregrine Elementary. This is the committee's recommendation for the Sienna Elementary attendance area. This new proposal moves the students who live on the east side of Meridian Road, previously proposed to attend Peregrine Elementary, to Sienna Elementary instead. This eliminates the need for those students to travel over the Meridian Road overpass and creates a solution to the parents' concerns. This is the committee's recommendation for the Mary McPherson Elementary attendance area. With the ongoing growth in the area, the committee took into consideration both the current and future enrollment. Mary McPherson currently has 2,400 sites approved for construction. This could produce an additional 775 elementary students. After receiving public feedback, one change was made to the original proposal, moving the eastern boundary line south of Lake Hazel just to the west. The committee considered the impact this change would have on both Mary McPherson and Hillsdale, as well as other factors, and decided this was a feasible request. In August of 2019, an enrollment cap was placed on Hillsdale Elementary. Any student who moved into Hillsdale Elementary attendance area after August 13th, 2019, was assigned to attend either Silver Sage or Sienna Elementary. After careful analysis, the committee believes that approving these proposed attendance areas for Sienna and Mary McPherson Elementary Schools will allow the school board to remove the enrollment cap placed on Hillsdale Elementary. This will not only allow the enrollment cap to be removed, but will accommodate the projected growth. The committee is proposing these small changes to a part of the Hillsdale Elementary attendance area in order to conform with the policy's guidance on neighborhood continuity. These attendance area lines were drawn prior to the completion of these developments, cutting off just one street from a contiguous neighborhood. This change also impacts a few parcels that have yet to be constructed. The parcels in the area were analyzed to see what the developments might look like after they were complete, such as their entry points. We believe making these changes will prevent these neighborhoods from being split by school attendance areas in the future. These small changes would also affect the Lewis and Clark and Lake Hazel Middle School attendance areas. Currently, Lake Hazel Middle School attendance area follows the Hillsdale attendance area, and the Lewis and Clark Middle School attendance area follows the Pepper Ridge Elementary attendance area. To adhere to the attendance area policy's guidance on feeder schools, the committee also proposes making these changes to the middle school attendance areas so the elementary students may continue to attend the middle schools with their peers. This change affects very few students. In fact, there is only one student identified that will change schools. This is the committee's recommendation for the Hillsdale Elementary attendance area. These changes will affect the following subdivisions. Green Valley will be in the Mary McPherson Elementary attendance area. Observation Point and Meridian Greens will be in the Sienna Elementary attendance area. As mentioned before, the committee's assignments were to create an attendance area for Chaparral Elementary and eliminate the enrollment cap at Hillsdale Elementary. This is their recommended proposal for accomplishing that goal. And these are the sites the district currently owns for future elementary schools. From the public feedback, parents expressed concerns about the proposal and submitted alternate attendance area plans. As the committee worked on these proposals using the criteria in the approved attendance area policy, they did not consider perceived school quality, nor did they consider socioeconomic status. One patron offered a counterproposal that extended the Chaparral and Peregrine attendance areas to the southern border of the district. This ignores the consideration to keep students together from elementary school to middle school if possible. The committee feels that their solution better addresses this consideration while still eliminating the need to travel over the Meridian Road overpass. The committee recommends adopting the attendance areas for the following schools as proposed: Chaparral, Peregrine, Mary McPherson, Hillsdale, Sienna, Lake Hazel Middle School, Lewis and Clark Middle School, and the committee maintains the recommendation of the previous attendance area committee for West Ada School District to propose a bond measure as soon as possible to include one elementary school south of I-84 to relieve future overcrowding and accommodate for the vast growth in the area. Again, the attendance area committee understands that it would be a bond committee that would create the scope of the bond to present to the public. And finally, the committee recommends removing the enrollment cap on Hillsdale Elementary.
Thank you, Ms. Horner. And also a huge thanks to the committee for the hours of work that they've spent on this. Before we take comments and questions from the trustees, we're going to go ahead and listen to patron feedback. For patron feedback, I didn't have anybody sign up to talk about the high school changes. There's nobody signed up to talk about the changes for the southern elementary schools, and we have one person that signed up for the northern elementary schools. Clerk Newbold, we have Amy Bernard, it looks like, to talk about the northern elementary schools. Thank you. Ms. Bernard, thank you for coming in to provide testimony. Before you begin, you'll just need to state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes. And just as a quick reminder, we're only allowing testimony on the boundary proposals. Thank you.
It's Amy Brainerd. And my kids go to Seven Oaks. And just to tell you a little bit about us, we had lived in Star. My kids were on a transfer to that school because they were on the wrong side of Star. After 1 year, they got kicked out. My daughter went to school in preschool in Eagle, so I decided to put them at Seven Oaks. Once we started volunteering there, I realized this is the culture, this is the place for my children to be. We moved to Eagle so that this wouldn't happen. When we outgrew the acreage that we had because of our kids' love of animals, we would only look at places that would allow us to stay in school because it's number one. And now we bought a home in the summer with 5 acres. We never would have bought this home if this was a consideration in any way, shape, or form. I cannot fathom my children being pulled from their family at school. The reason it's so hard to draw lines between 3 schools in 2 miles is because it really shouldn't be done. I just want you to think about the fact that if the growth is projected on the Avamore side and growth is projected off of Floating Feather towards Star, if you cap Eagle Hills, the other 2 schools will fill in. This will regulate itself. If you decide to draw the lines, it should be incoming students only. In the next few years, new schools are going to have to be built and kids are going to have to move all over again. We should first just focus on doing no harm. This will harm them in ways that are unfathomable. Unfathomable. In a year where this has been their consistency, this has been all they've looked forward to, and they will jump through any hoop and any change and anything that's thrown at them if it means they get to stay in their school. My kids are looking forward to teachers their siblings have had and can't wait to have them next year, and they feel safe there. They should be able to next year get their education back on track and have stability instead of having the rug pulled out from under them and have everything change. Kids are going to 5th grade and getting plucked from their school to a new 5th grade right before they go to middle school. That is going to be detrimental in ways that we cannot imagine. I am begging you, if you were me, you would be standing here too. I am begging you to think about the fact that this is going to do so much harm to our children. And we can fix these issues and have vision for the future and plan without plucking them from where they are. And I think that is the consensus amongst everyone. We are just begging you to have a transition that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brainerd. At this time, I'll open the floor for questions and comments from the trustees and Chairwoman Johnson.
Vice Chair
Trustee
Zuna,
Klaus.
thank you very much. I appreciate the time. And thank you very much, Ms. Horner, for your presentation. I'm very impressed. It's a very hard job you have. Very hard job. I did have 2 questions. One is about the high school zone, especially underneath the walk zone that's transitioning basically to, it's basically a busing zone from Rocky over to Owyhee. And I'm just curious, do you know by chance how much time the kids will be spending on a bus from those zones to go over to school?
Chair and trustees, Dr. Reynolds, I actually don't have that information from Mr. Updike could give us that information.
Okay,
I don't
I was
have
just
that.
a little curious. Is it? I'm not sure what the history of children going from a walk zone would be, as far as. And I'm not criticizing or anything. I'm just trying to understand kind of your perception on that area. Is it purely just because that's where the numbers are?
Yes, as I said, that those are very dense blocks around Rocky Mountain High School. And I think it's important to note, and as I showed in the slide, that the 2 blocks that are south, they're not entirely in a walk zone. In fact, almost half of the students live in a bus zone in those 2 areas. So So that was something that the committee considered.
Excellent. Okay. I just was curious how you considered that or what was being considered.
Mm-hmm.
The other question I had to do with the southern area. I was curious about that northwest quadrant from Siena. So there's like right now it's kind of catty corner, and they have to almost do a jump to go over to Hillsdale. In that quadrant, how many times have those kids switched schools over the past couple of years? I'm not sure if you have that ready.
And just for clarification, are these the students in the quadrant that are being moved
To Siena,
this proposal
yes.
to Siena?
Exactly, yes.
Yes, so they have been moved previously. The students that are currently attending school have not moved.
Okay.
So
all right.
none of the current elementary school kids have moved. So perhaps siblings have moved in the past or families that lived there prior, but the students haven't.
Wonderful. Okay, that was my only question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the time, Vice Chair.
Other questions? Trustee Buffy?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Zuna. Ms. Horner, was grandfathering considered for juniors?
Okay, so grandfathering juniors has never been done with a new high school. It was done with when students were changed from a current high school to another current high school. The committee considered it. What it would do is it would reduce enrollment at Owyhee High School, which would also limit the class options that they would be able to offer at Owyhee High School. Another effect would be on the ability to have extracurricular activities. Sports would be affected, music, drama, those productions would be affected. It wasn't precedented, and we didn't want to start that precedent, nor did we feel like it was a good idea to do that.
Thank you.
Chairwoman Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually didn't have any questions. I wanted to just make a comment. There's a little bit of echo. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. The committee did what I think is a phenomenal job with a set of schools across our district that, from a strategic standpoint, are not placed in equal portions so that it's easy to draw these boundary lines. So I guess what I wanted to just express was not only the analytical and strategic capabilities of the committee, how that came out in the proposal and how impressive that was, but also the fact that they listened to the patron feedback and made decisions to make changes that supported patron feedback when it could also support the student success and meet the policy guidelines that we gave them. And so I just wanted to express a sincere appreciation for that, because that's not something that I have seen as significant in the past as we had this time. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson. I have a quick question about the Owyhee High School. Is there a minimum number of students that we need in that school for it to open successfully to make sure that we can offer the classes that we need to and run the programs that you were talking about earlier? And what I'm really wondering there is, are we going to run into some issues with grandfathering of seniors as well?
I don't think we're going to run into an issue with grandfathering seniors. There are 323 seniors that could potentially remain at their current school or come in, and those students were accounted for in the proposal, which is why I wasn't able to say we think that we're going to start at 1,500. I gave that range because of those unknowns. So I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you. Trustees, Chairwoman Johnson, are there any other questions? Okay, and just a reminder, we are not taking any action on this until our meeting next week. So thank you. Thank you again, Ms. Horner, and thanks to the amazing work that the committee did on this.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it. Moving along in the agenda, we're going to talk about the interview process to fill the vacant trustee position in Zone 4. We have 28 applicants for our, I'm looking for a nod from Clerk Newbold, 28 applicants for our open trustee position. Given the large interest, we need to discuss the process that we'll want to use to fill the vacant seat. I'll open the floor for discussion. Thank you.
This is Trustee Johnson.
Chairwoman Johnson, go ahead.
I can't see the screen in the room, but I sent Troy a copy of a Word document that I'm hoping he can pull up for you all. So if you'll let me know if you can see it, I'd like to just talk through this with the committee, or with the board, I mean.
Great, we have it up. Thank you.
Okay. So with 28 candidates in our normal interview process, first of all, 28 candidates is awesome. I think it's really a testament to how many people care about what's going on in their schools and want to be involved. So we have to figure out, though, we have to do this a little bit different, because in the past we haven't had that many candidates. And if we do our normal process with 2 minutes per question and we ask a series of questions, everybody would be in a group interview process for well over 6 to 8 hours, and that just isn't feasible for anyone. So working through this and thinking about it and working with our attorney and others, I have a proposal for the board I want to just walk through. If we like this proposal, we would need to make a motion to adopt it. So keeping with our normal interview process, we would slot into this one sort of a first phase. And the first phase would be follow the outline. We would ask all the candidates to complete and submit written responses. So we would do basically a written interview where they would submit written responses to the interview questions. The interview questions would be posted tomorrow. Those responses would be due by Friday at noon. We would also ask, if we didn't have it, I think we do have it for everyone, a resume to be submitted. The board can then take the written responses to a series of interview questions from all 28 candidates, review those between Friday and Tuesday, and at the Tuesday board meeting, the board would walk through a process and select 8 candidates at the beginning of the meeting to move forward to the verbal interview round. And then we would follow our normal verbal interview process that we have had in the past when we've selected a new trustee for a zone. I wanted to just stop there and see if there's any questions or concerns or comments from other trustees around this proposal.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson. Trustee Klopfenstein?
Chairman Johnson, thank you very much, and I really appreciate this process. I think it's very thoughtful. I was just curious, for those 8 candidates, how many questions overall were you thinking of handling? And I'm assuming it's going to be round robin, they go through just like we did last time. For the verbal part, that is, excuse me.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Ozuna and Trustee Klopfenstein. We get down to 8 candidates. If we follow our normal process, we would have 8 questions, and we would we would have each candidate be the first responder on one of those questions. That would put us in a roughly at a 2-minute response time, about a 2-hour interview process, which is close or about the same as the process that we used when we selected Trustee Buffy at the last round of candidate interviews.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I was also curious, so you're saying 2 minutes each instead of the 3 minutes like we had last time, or is that what you're looking at? Did I hear that correctly? It was 3 minutes? It was 2 minutes.
Trustee Ozuna and Trustee Klopfenstein, I think if I'd looked to Clerk Newbold, but I think we went back and I want to say we actually did use 2 minutes last time. But I'd asked Clerk Newbold to let me know for sure which ones we used.
Excellent. I was just curious. Thank you very much. I appreciate the appreciate the work on the process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Buffy, your thoughts?
Thank you, Vice Chair. I like the process. I think that the candidates would appreciate the process as well, because just recently going through it this month or so ago, it was a very long process, and it was rewarding. It was definitely exhausting, and I think that if we would have had the opportunity to go through the written questions and then to then go through, based on selections made by the board, to do the verbal interview, I think I would have appreciated that as well. So I think that this is a very well thought out process, and I support it.
Great. Thank you, Trustee Buffy, and thank you, Chairwoman Johnson, for putting this together. Are there any other questions or comments on this?
Trustees, I do have one question of Chairman Johnson. So the candidates, how are you going to get to the 8 candidates? I know you're going to interview, look at the questions, but what's that process of saying, like, you know, Trustee Ozuna, how does she put forth her candidate? I don't understand how you get to that 8. Is there a process to get to that 8 besides how do you eliminate? How do you decide who moves forward?
Thank you for that question.
Thank you,
Clerk
Trustee.
Noble. Go ahead, Chairwoman Johnson.
Thank you, Trustee Ozuna. Clerk Newbold, we will have an evaluation process based on the written interviews, and we'll outline that process for the candidates at the beginning of the meeting on January 19th.
Okay, so trustees, one other question. I just want to clarify this because Troy is our mastermind of putting this all together. So if we invite all of these candidates to our meeting and we can't disinvite them, I don't think, and this would be something that I had discussed with Troy, because I would hate for a candidate to interrupt our meeting if they were not chosen. And I just was concerned, and I know Troy and I had discussed that, so I just wanted to know that process for him as well as for myself so that we can go with that.
Clerk Newbold, is it Troy, is it possible to mute somebody that's been invited to our meeting?
Potentially, but there's also a way for them to unmute themselves and get back into the meeting themselves. So I'm looking at 2 different platforms, so we may have to change up into a different platform for it. So I can send out an email, let you all know what I recommend it by the end of the week.
Okay. Chairwoman Johnson?
And Chairman Ozuna and Troy and Sherry, I'd ask you to consider the waiting room option in Teams, so we can admit the candidates that are moving forward in the interview. But we'll work it out. We'll have a process. Ultimately, we have a couple options for the selection process, but I want to make sure that we've been thorough and thoughtful on it, and so we will work through and have that outlined at the beginning of the meeting for how the board will work through that process and adopt those or select those candidates. And we will end up having to make a motion on the 8 candidates selected.
Okay, thank you. Clerk Newbold?
I'm sorry, Chairman Johnson, I have one more question. So if you all adopt this process, would this be the process you would want me to email all of the candidates tomorrow?
Trustee Ozuna and Clerk Newbold, yes. So this is written up so that you can add this to the process that would be emailed to the candidates tomorrow.
And then one final question. I am so sorry. When would the questions be available so that Troy can post those as well? Because I know I put together some questions, and I don't know how many you all want to ask written questions.
To you, Trustee Ozuna and Clerk Newbold, I believe you sent out that document to the board, and we're collecting feedback. If we've missed a board trustee on feedback on the questions on written, we can get that quickly. hopefully you can get it in the room tonight from the board members you missed. I know I'm comfortable with the questions you sent out from a written this afternoon, but I can't speak for everybody else.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments before we move to action on this? Okay, not hearing any. We'll move to the action portion of our agenda. And I'm looking for a motion to outline the interview process to fill the vacant trustee position for Zone 4.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I
Chairwoman
would
Johnson?
move that, I'm hoping the language is still on the screen, so I would move that the board adopt the additional insertion of the interview process as outlined in the discussion and showing on the screen.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Klopfenstein. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great, and it passes 4-0. Thank you. Next on our agenda is a superintendent report. Dr. Rannells or Mr. Heller, we were hoping you could give us an update on the process being used to determine the conditions or criteria to return secondary students to daily in-person learning. Chairwoman Johnson, it looks like Mr. Heller is coming to the podium. Thank you, Mr. Heller.
Thank you. Vice Chair Ozuna, Board of Trustees, Dr. Rannells. Yeah, I just wanted to update you on the work that we're doing. As I think I've communicated a little bit with you regarding the process we've been following. We formed two committees, one for middle school and one for high school, that will start their work tomorrow. Those meetings begin tomorrow to essentially start looking at answering the question, what are the conditions that need to exist in order to bring middle school and high school students back to daily in-person instruction in the West Ada School District. And our committees include parents, teachers, building administrators, district administrators, school nurses, trustee members of the Board of Trustees, and our medical partners. I think we have a fairly diverse committee with diverse opinions in terms of what our next step should be, and it's going to be an interesting process for sure. Our goal, if we can meet it, is to meet over the next 3 weeks. I've told the committee our goal is to have criteria forward to the board for their consideration by February 2nd for the February 9th board meeting. This is obviously a fairly divisive topic with people with lots of different opinions, and I believe our committee is fairly well representative of folks from all sides of the argument. So we're working forward on this idea of how can we be open-minded and really think about the next steps for our district and for the students in our district to come back to school daily, whenever the case may be, but we need to identify the criteria that will help us decide that.
Thank you, Mr. Heller. Trustees, are there any questions on the process that's being used? There's no questions in the room.
Ozuna?
Chairwoman Johnson?
Yeah, I have just one quick question for Mr. Heller. I totally understand. So first of all, appreciate the process of taking multiple stakeholder viewpoints as well as diverse opinions, because I think at the end of the day, we're hoping for collaboration across all those areas. I have a quick question just around kind of a practical matter, and that has to do with because of the timing, and I also understand the need for a little bit of time on this, we're going to have a recommendation after the second semester starts for the year. And if there are any parents who are really adamant that once they see that language, they do not want their children in a situation of returning to school, what's their alternative to get into the virtual school, or how do we help those parents now? Because I think we've made the intent in our plan that we're going to do it. We just want to make sure, is there going to be an opportunity for parents who don't feel comfortable with that for their own children to get them enrolled in a virtual schoolhouse? And I'm asking because I know it's hard to change middle school students, particularly because the virtual schoolhouse follows a different schedule than the middle school in person.
So Trustee Johnson, trustees, I think the general answer is we're going to do everything we can to take care of our folks who are nervous about maybe a criteria that they think may result in us coming back to school this year and that want to consider the virtual schoolhouse. The specific answers are definitely more challenging when you start looking student by student and their schedules. But I would say we're going to find ways to be as flexible as we possibly can in terms of meeting those students' needs. So if they need to move into the virtual schoolhouse, that we do that and we don't let that academically cause them any harm. So we're going to do everything we can to take care of those. But I think to give you an absolute right now would be difficult. We have had the conversations with the virtual schoolhouse folks about what could that look like. We are continuing to explore it. I think the unknown is how many students want that option, and that's the real unknown at this point. So yeah, it is our goal that if we have families that are adamant that they need to pursue the virtual schoolhouse once they've seen this criteria, we will work every bit of magic we can to make that happen for them.
Thank you. Vice Chair Ozuna, I would ask, just because of the way this process has worked, we closed virtual schoolhouse enrollment prior to the board deciding and asking for you to go back and look at the language. So I would ask if there are any parents that are already uncomfortable, that the administration consider communication and try and collect those students now before the second semester starts.
And Chairperson Johnson, Board of Trustees, I would say we're already in a lot of conversations with a lot of those families. There are families that, even though it closed, are continuing to work with Principal Reberry, with Director Marcus Meyer. So they are continuing to engage with families that are uncomfortable with the level of in-person learning we have now and that have come forward. And so that is ongoing, and I would anticipate that will continue to be a process. But we can certainly figure out a way to reach out and make that another opportunity for parents.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Heller, for that update.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the trustees? No? All right. Moving toward adjournment. Is there a motion? Thought I missed something. No, you're great. Thank you. Moving toward adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Klopfenstein. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Trustee Ozuna, I think you beat a record on time of adjournment.
Fantastic. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.